Hey guys, it's Matt. I prepared a short summary before I start reading chapter 32. I start the chapter off talking a lot about C the V and the action Jacksonation movie rental. There's a lot of code here, especially in this first section. I don't even want a banner ad. Guys, I hate those darn things where they direct you to the real truth. I can't, there's a lot of code, but if you're new, you'll be able to follow along. This chapter is not bog specific and just concentrating on C the V. This is just one example presented that further demonstrates a Goldilocks reality. A Goldilocks reality is not a real reality. The first grade truther is so in the weeds, specific, topic by topic, chase by chase, they fail to ever notice how the dark reality operates as a whole. Again, to the spitballers in the back, you must wait for the chapter to evolve out of the action Jacksonation lead-in to reach the final conclusion. And yes, I notice there's overlap and repeated concepts. If this ever makes it to book form, guys, about 40% of this will be cut out. Maybe half of it. It absolutely needs to be cut out if it ever goes to print. Right now, it's a book of concepts designed to be talked out on YouTube videos, which is a much different process than writing for a bound book. Chapter 32. Incredibly, the old man and a chair disciples in our community are still throwing around the word genocide in regard to those who rented the action Jacksonation movie. Got it? For billions of people that got the two big guys and then got two more boosters, for some up to 6 chemical cocktails in the arm, that many? Of course there's going to be increased incidence of movie watching injury and much worse. That's over 25 billion chemical injections in total around the world. All sorts of problems are to be expected when tens of billions of injections are administered. Just think about the number, the sheer size of it. I'm well aware of all the theories. Matt, this batch of cookie dough was meant to cause harm and indigestion. This batch was bad, and they meant it to hurt this group, and I'm aware of all that. But the word used was genocide. What they did in 2020 rolling into 2021 with, I can't even say the company names, I don't want the banner ad, the hurting groups of people directly with soccer players dropping over was not obviously their primary motivation. Again, don't forget the number, possibly 25 billion chemical cocktails. Look around you. Is it mass extinction out your window? Is genocide the right words? Do these people understand the definition of genocide? They used the term recklessly, and they contributed to the Not Milk's main objective, fear. I pushed back on these people from the start, from the middle to the end of 2021 when they started talking about all this stuff, saying, that's not how, quote, our adversary does business. Have you learned nothing? The old man in a chair motorcycle gang doesn't understand how the Not Milk operates. They're a group of vampire hunters waiting for Dracula on a park bench under a hot noon sun. They don't understand the basics about the thing they're trying to combat. Dracula doesn't walk his devil dogs out in the Arizona sun. After all this time, they don't know the basic nature of our adversary. In the last chapter, we discussed loosh energy at length. What the old man and the chair disciples said would happen to billions who got the movie rental action Jacksonation with Carl Weathers bought. That can't happen. What they say was going to happen, throwing around that word genocide, can't happen in this reality. People dropping over in the minimum per what they said would happen, hundreds of millions, violates how we know the dark reality needs to function. There's no polarity when something becomes so one-sided. Cement needs a variety of materials in order to harden, brought together by water. The Not Milk is never obvious and always delivers, quote, Goldilocks by playing the middle, so the sides clash together in conflict in order to generate energy that it uses for food. This is obvious at this point. It must give each side just enough evidence so they dig in and never consider the other side. The more they fight, the fatter it gets. Polarity, friction, camps, fighting, emotional response, hate, fear, families break up. That's how it eats. We don't know this by now? So those that got all worked up, oh, they're going to Georgia Guidestone everybody. They're going to Georgia Guidestone everybody with this next batch. You did exactly what it wanted, you dummies. Instead of screaming genocide, which is exactly what it wants, by the way, take a step back, first grade truthers, and notice how reality operates. It's 2023. We should know a lot by now. So here we are, almost 4 years after the start of their latest big event. And tell them what they've won, Johnny. What a coincidence. We have yet again, for the 100th time, a perfect Goldilocks situation of a fake world playing out right in front of us in the same exact way that it always does, creating camps, friction, infighting, relationships ending, families ending. There was just enough incidents of harm associated with the movie rental, so certain people dig in. Few people email me for years, every single time somebody known or younger falls over unexpectedly and mysteriously. They've got to tell me about every single case. 500 million people in North America, and people are emailing me case by case, celebrity deaths, one at a time. Of course, they're absolutely sure what happened to that poor devil is the renting of the movie. Even probably Matthew Perry. Somebody put it in his whatever. I mean, it has to be related, right? I'm not saying people weren't harmed. 25 billion cocktails, okay? I'm saying it wasn't even close to the screen's primary motivation. It's amazing how many people will selectively listen to these presentations and then they'll email me exactly what I did not say. One last time, people were harmed. But if you're still trying to hold on to the word genocide, you're out of your mind. The amount of whatever, that whole soccer player thing, come on, man. It was such a not milk presentation. Couldn't you just feel it? Soccer, come on, man. You can't feel when the not milk's making a presentation. Oh, here's the start of it. The amount of whoever was harmed is tiny compared to what the fearmongers predicted. As you know, I examine reality itself. I'm not trying to initiate a bog conversation, like I said in the summary before this chapter. Once again, I'm pointing out the Goldilocks principle that is a symptom of a fake world. With this event, as with everything else, it plays right down the middle. The incidence of movie rental harm is never quite high enough for the masses to ever come over to our side, never quite high enough to realize, your friends and family, that something really bad is going on here. Incidence is always just perfect, so each camp stays in their camps. What real world could keep doing that over and over again? The incidence is always, in this particular case, low enough where the associated harm or, quote, celebrity deaths is brought up in a conversation. One of us brings it up at the Thanksgiving table. The person talking about it is considered a conspiracy loon. As I told you, my uncle was the only one in my family who went into the hospital. He went into the hospital for a blood clot. Okay? I'm not going to say anything else. You know where I'm going with this. Now, the rest of my old fat family, they're just fine. 35, 40 people. They're just fine. So when I hinted to my family, as I did, because we didn't know what was going on at the time, I hinted to a few that there could certainly be an association between why my uncle is in there. Of course, I was dismissed as a loon. It's incredible how, with such precision, it plays its not-nil games, does it to us in the same way every single time.
But I guess it's just the secret societies.
One of the Asshole Dark's most impressive qualities is how it always seems to know the exact level of what it can get away with, and almost always brings the right mix of ingredients to each group in order to stir them up to produce the maximum amount of friction, but not too much to where a person ever goes over to the other side. It'll give Matt what he needs to form his conclusion, but Tony will be given a separate set to form his conclusion. And there's never enough on Matt's side to convince Tony to come over to the other side. It does this over and over again, decade after decade, probably century after century. No real world can do this. Once a person digs a hole inside what they consider to be their camp, then almost nobody ever leaves that camp. We've done that too. We've dug into our camp, but from Tony's perspective, the conspiracy loon side. But we feel we're objectively correct on most fronts, and there is evidence to support us. It is a certainty that folded aluminum does not pass through 10,000-pound steel beams. Especially folded aluminum, where on the top there's a sticker that says no step, that's hollow, does not pass through 10,000-pound steel beams. There is what you would consider to be objective truth on our side. It is certain the parents of little children don't take podiums and don't laugh the very next day. Okay, we have a lot of these. There are objective differences between those in lifeboats and those still on the ship of fools. It has one primary objective from its perspective, to eat, to feed, no matter what you call it. The screen, the not milk, the asshole dark. It's putting out its same playbook, same run up the middle to create camps, to harness a certain frequency or emotional energy. Okay, now it serves a larger role in this reality. Things we'll talk about another time. I'm way off the book here. It is a role player here to, in a way, of course, block our spiritual journey. So we don't do what we're supposed to do here. In this sense, it is the reality's adversary. But from its perspective, it might not care about that. Whoever designed this reality, it seems, you put this ugly thing in here. As it feeds, it knows to feed, it will block a person's spiritual journey. They go hand in hand. It might not care about blocking someone's spiritual journey, but when it feeds, it blocks. See, they go hand in hand. Greg told me a story about a big fight his father got into with a younger family member when they debated on whether a child of age 5, 6, or 7 should be able to, choose its own, whatever it identifies, choose its own at age 5, 6, or 7, and then make whatever changes it wants and adapt their lifestyles. But of course, Greg's father took the more traditional conservative approach versus the younger brainwashed millennial. The Not Milk is very happy about that sort of family fight when it happens. Greg said his dad kicked the 20-year-old relative out of the house. The screen's egregore that lingers close to Greg's neighborhood ate well that day. Guys, I just mentioned egregore. I got to tell you what happened yesterday. I almost never make a video on Monday. I try to do something mindless, get away from studying the dark reality or whatever. And, I've been into these Russian stoves and how they're configured. I've been putting little blocks together, little mini bricks I ordered in through Amazon. But now I'm doing it for real in my garage, right? I have these fire bricks that I had from making the rocket stove. So I'm stacking them up in different configurations. I know it's a weird hobby, but I have the radio on. Just throw a boombox in there at WMMR 93.3 Pierre Robert, and it comes back from commercial break, and he says, the new one from the Rolling Stones, Angry, with a big tour announced for 2024, probably the biggest event of 2024. And here's a new song, Angry. I went, oh no. I'm angry that you're still touring. Why don't you and your egregore go bother someone else? Guys, the stalled century is beyond, at this point, anything we could have possibly imagined. I've told this story before, but it is mind-boggling. I remember, I'm almost positive, being in elementary school when the Rolling Stones announced a gigantic, this is the late 70s, a gigantic comeback tour. They had been gone for whatever. People were talking about trying to get tickets in Philadelphia. I remember my cousin was going. We were talking about how lucky he was in elementary school. This was a big deal that the Rolling Stones were coming back. It was the late 70s. It's still happening. This is almost, I almost can't even wrap my head around how bizarre this is. And it's with everything. My favorite is Vanna White. I'm picturing a Dr. Lecter from Silence of the Lambs gurney. She won't be able to walk. They'll wheel her out. Someone will, like a push cart. Remember when he said, hey, Senator, love your suit. She'll be with the Dr. Lecter mask, though. Someone will push her out on a gurney, and she'll just look up with that, that real nasty mask with the metal cage in front of her mouth. She'll look and just change the letters by looking up at the letter. I'm not joking. They're capable of almost anything at this point. Sorry. I'll return to the book with a question. Do you know what group has been responsible for baking the most bread for the asshole dark in human history? We have. Us? We conspiracy people. Us? Us. We've baked it the most bread. You and me have served it the most energy, or more than any other group, I would say, since JFK. From, say, 2008 to, say, 2012, it wanted us making thousands of 7-Eleven job application videos served with endless sides of mall events and school events. It wanted relationships to end because of our discoveries and for our families to think we're strange because of the stances we took on these topics. Somehow, many truthers still say the Not Milk fears being exposed by us. Insert laugh track now. It's actually the opposite. It works very hard to be exposed by us, but only in the way it wants to be exposed. Much of this, quote, revelation of the method stuff is actually correct. If it can be revealed by a group that has already been marginalized, then there is no public uptake of that truth. Relating the story, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, to us, the boy then is used by the wolf. The first grade truthers think that just men and women, people who burp and fart and eat Subway sandwiches on the pot, as you and I do, are pulling everything off perfectly, decade after decade, always creating perfect Goldilocks situations. Of course, there are men on the ground doing things. The minions of this world are on their own kind of download, and most are as fooled as the masses on the ship of fools are, but in a different way. Perhaps it's a different frequency for certain classifications of minions. Think of the thousands of them at the level of, say, Lady Gaga, or Dr. F, or Lars from Metallica, that Peckerwood boy, Tom Hanks, people at that level. George W. Bush may be at that same level. They know their little bucket, but they don't understand a damn thing about how reality works. They know what club they're in. They know what team they play for, but they have no higher understanding. Who knows how high up the org chart you need to go into the realms of the old money before they have a decent understanding about how reality works? We have given, as I've said many times, too much credit to these buffoons that parade around as not-milk minions. Even if your dastardly secret societies are as terrible as all the first-grade truthers think they are, then at that level, they're just pawns of something much bigger that they themselves don't fully understand. This is why our focus changed about 5 years ago. Strange terms were introduced, like Clinton backwards, not milk, saying, no, these bad actors, this thing here wants us to believe that all these little bad actors are kind of acting on their own, and there's something else here with us. There's something in some way coordinating all of this, and not just for the pedestrian reasons that the first-grade truthers and the spitballers believe. Oh, they want to build a pipeline for money. No, this is much bigger. Something here is trying to block us spiritually from what we need to do. Something that's beyond and bigger than this place. And I didn't mean to imply that it is bigger than this place. It is confined to this place, in my opinion. I mean, the issue for us, the stakes for us, what we need to do, it's bigger than this place. That's why it just wants us focused on this place, as this place is all there is. Everything you are is this place. I didn't mean to imply it's bigger than this place. You almost gave it away out, Matt. Yeah, we don't want to make that mistake. Let's reiterate. Oh, it's stuck here. This is its Andy Dufresne cell. We just visited. Guys, 1 minute away from the book. I think I mentioned to you that Tony emailed me that he's listening to a few of my videos. The point is here, could you imagine if he's listening to this one? Oh my, it'd be right out of that scene in Braveheart. He'd want to do a Hamish to me. Remember the guy that said Ireland was his or whatever, joined the camp? Hamish says, "You're a madman." He says, "I came to the right place." And he'd be wanting to say that. Could you imagine all this weird code? And Tony, if you're listening, all I can say is this. Go rent the movie with Rowdy Roddy Piper, They Live, a cult classic, I think from the mid-'80s. Now, when Roddy Piper puts those glasses on, a whole new reality is revealed. When he takes the glasses off, it's not there. There's something behind the veil. Now, the people here with us, these people developed a sense of perception about how this reality works. They don't need the glasses. And you can't see it. We hope someday you can see it. Now, this is what's going on. If you want to, though, you can believe it's just 90,000 people blogging from the asylum, rubbing feces all over themselves in the bathtub, but that's not really what's happening. To summarize the first part of chapter 32 before the next part, if the renting of the movie, Action Jacksonation, killed people, but it's a dangerous blockbuster. If the renting of the movie killed people, then what I'm saying, it was not out to kill people as an end in and of itself. It was a means to an end, an energy end. Once again, a means to eat. If Action Jacksonation, starring Carl Weathers, really worked, actually made people feel better, had some vitamins and minerals, people jumped out of bed in the morning at 5:30, never needed an alarm clock, people could look and see those that rented the movie with Carl Weathers actually are doing much better, and then everybody wanted to do it, and it actually was good, would that create any friction that this thing needs to eat? Oh, it wouldn't. So to create the friction, it needs to harm in some way, at least at enough incident where the camps can be formed. What we call the not milk could have impacted the population in massive ways many times over the last 150 years. We can create a new verb. We're creating verbs every video. They could have Georgia Guidestoned the heck out of us. They could have Georgia Guidestoned us. We could make it into a verb. Of course they could have. Just look at what they did. I mean, millions were killed in World War I, indirectly and directly, over absolutely nothing. It is said that Mao took out 50 to 60 million in whatever the heck happened in what was called the Cultural Revolution. It's quite a culture. They should be very proud. Remember that strange website we looked at a few years ago related in some way to the University of Hawaii, where they coined a new term to me, democide. Democide. In the 20th century, 250 million people dead, not associated with world wars, but associated with the actions of their own governments, 250 million. The point is, they do stuff, and they could have done a lot more, and if they wanted to Georgia Guidestone us, they could have done it. Don't need to wait until 2021 with the release of Punky Boosters. They didn't have to wait, okay? Why do they wait? Because it's never going to happen because we're its food. How many times do I have to say that? In the movie Jupiter Ascending, they harvest the energy in these vials, these white vials that glow or something. They hand it to Jupiter. She drops it all over the floor. Oh no, how many humans had to die for that? Just 100. That's okay, we got a lot more. It's okay that you smashed it all over the floor. They didn't just do it to everybody at once. They were managing their crop. They took energy. People were harmed. If somebody had to get in that vial, right? But they kept the society, quote, from their perspective, thriving to continue to produce the crop. Incredibly, I think these old men in a chair parishioners are still waiting for people to keel over. They're still holding on to their hopes of genocide. They want it to happen. They're addicted to the fear, but that's another video. In 2021, the not milk needed just enough incidents of injury, blah, 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 and blank after renting the movie to satisfy the Goldilocks scenario so people dig into their opposing camps. It needed just enough bad news so the anti-V people got angry, yet not enough incidents so the rest of the population then would never come around to their point of view, that the renting of the movie is harmful. Injury, and even worse, seems to have risen just enough. It's there, of course, but it's risen just enough so truthers on that side dig in and nobody else does. Remember, the purpose of this section is to point out Goldilocks. And from its perspective, Goldilocks is a friction that creates energy. It seems to adjust its circumstances, sometimes almost individual by individual in terms of their perception, to achieve its perfect mix and balance of what it needs to eat. A not milk witch's brew, never too much salt, exactly half of a salamander's ear. Remember, it takes two to tango. That's a stuffed lemon. It takes a mix of chemicals to ignite the spark, which starts the car from a spark plug. In my family, it was just as I said, my 80-year-old uncle who ended up in the hospital. It happened probably 2 to 4 months from my estimation. Of course, I tried to talk to somebody about it, could never get any real details. I say 2 to 4 months after he rented the Carl Weathers movie, he was in the hospital. And then he had some sort of adverse event there, which kept him in there an extra 4 or 5 days. Again, I could never pin down the exact date. As I said, the rest of the family, though, is old, fat, and just as unhealthy as they were, but they're still out there ticking, no issues at all. The Goldilocks situation, as it was presented to me in my sample size, but we all have similar types of examples, 2 different perceptions based on the exact same circumstances, depending on where we're coming from. On one hand, somebody like me in our community that could see there's a link between the harm that's coming to my uncle and potentially what he participated in and people talking and people sending me old man in a chair videos, and that's in the back of my mind. And then to the lovers of Dr. F, most everybody, most of my family, the lovers of Dr. F, that Matt, you're not suggesting there could be a relationship between that good life-saving thing and what happened. He's an older man. That could happen to anybody. No possibility they could be linked. Is anybody surprised? Of course not. And one final time, I'm not trying to continue a conversation about C the V or make a link. I'm trying to point out that the situation that presents itself of Goldilocks is unnatural, is supernatural, couldn't keep happening in a real world, and is obviously there to create the energy that it needs. Forget about the specific examples that I'm using. Matt, are you saying that in 2021 the not milk created injury, illness, and the movie Death at a Funeral as a means to an end? And it does not care about the injury, illness, and the movie Death at a Funeral on its own? That is needed as a means to its end? Yeah. And I don't think anybody needed me to say that again, but it's written here. So that's exactly what I'm saying. It cares about the family fighting, the hate, and the energy creation. It does not care about what the Georgia Guidestones say directly. We know how it must operate by now. Yet basic principles are rarely understood by what we call the truth community. Take the story I talked about a few minutes ago, soccer players or famous athletes falling over, keeling over, in the middle of games. The old man in the chair disciples jump up and they say, Matt, look, everybody, this is the beginning of what we predicted, the start of the Mass. You know what that we've been calling for. Somebody, as I said, been emailing me every single soccer player that falls over one by one. No, we should be able to conclude by now that the Not Milk is simply playing its same game over and over again, but in a slightly different way. The illness and movie Death at a Funeral that are actually caused by the movie give the old man in a chair disciples just enough evidence so they can double down on their position and dig in, whereby once again, the incident rate is not nearly high enough to get anybody normal or anybody like my friend Tony to give any credence to any sinister intent that may be taking place. What a coincidence. It's Goldilocks yet again, for the millionth time. Everything is, all the time, event by event. The 1969 Apollo is just believable enough so your family and friends consider you mad when you talk about it. The Mandela effect is always subtle. The elections are so close that they push to the next day. It is played right down the middle in yet another presentation 1,000 times in a row. And the spitballers in the back, I told you, Matt, you don't realize what those secret societies can do. We're taught to love those in our own camp and treat them as our brethren, while those in opposing camps were conditioned to hate. This is how energy in this realm best suited for the asshole dark is created. How they, or it, collects it up may involve the topic of egregores or tulpas. Its methods there we don't fully understand. The final step, the processing of the energy that it's collected up, from our perspective is probably the most disturbing. Maybe Jupiter Ascending is like a mini documentary. What exactly takes in the energy it works so hard to create? Some weird and dark stuff to think about. All we can do is make sure it doesn't take our own energy, another worry about yourself activity. So the purveyors of the movie rental being mass genocide through that Blockbuster rental bot, those people haven't learned a damn thing about how reality works. If you're putting your efforts into researching the conspiracy of the month, you haven't learned a damn thing about how this reality works. Each conspiracy must be viewed as a tiny part of a whole, with only the Not Milk's main desired outcome being relevant from our perspective in terms of how to guard against it and what armor to put on to fight it. Not to fight it directly, to fight it from getting into our heart-based reality bubble. That's all that matters. The basic nature of its game never changes, decade after decade. The truthers that can't see it at this point, I don't think we can help them. The sheer amount of conspiracy it has generated and produced crossed the absurd level in 2001 with the 7-Eleven job application. It's now creating conspiracy at ludicrous speed, and it has gone plaid. There's a multi-level conspiracy attached to almost everything of significance in this world, and that's simply not possible if we live on a rock floating in outer space surrounded by the entropy of the Big Bang. People send me notifications of cake and a lake stories on the news weekly, like a mall event or a school event, for example. Well, tell them what they've won, Johnny. A date with another laughing victim. A few months ago, I got one about a young man in Kentucky who killed people at a bank. It's a real news story. He killed people at a bank, and then, of course, he turned the gun on himself to make a statement about the need for gun control. That's like Pontius Pilate hanging himself in a desperate attempt to stop the spread of Christianity. Put himself up on the cross, Pontius Pilate. But what about Jesus and Barabbas? So you can go. Let him go. It's a little bit mixed up, but I'm sure that what the Not Milk presented in terms of that news story is 100% legitimate, and you'd have to be one of those people to question it. The point is, we see a story about once a week that seems to have all these bizarro cake and a lake elements. It's not just Captain Sandy or Take Your Pulse events. Take Your Pulse and Heartbeat. It's not those events that are absurd. The absurdity is now spread into everything. All of them, everything presented in the news that's at all big has absurd elements. No real world could keep doing that. But from its perspective, the screen wants the absurd elements. In the past, we were tempted to dive in and do more research case by case when we picked our head up out of the water and noticed how it was trying to attract our attention. Today, we see this behavior is exactly what it wants from us, and most of us, at least at this channel, won't take the bait any longer. It's almost impossible to fathom how, say, the outer ring of reality pulls all of this off. So, fortunately, in our community at least, we've stopped trying to figure it out. We're not doing that as a worry about your self-activity. That's what it wants us doing. But because the extent of the coordination, or what it would take, is so massive across hundreds of major events, it allows people like my friend Tony to prove to himself that we surely must be wrong. He has a good point. I understand his position in this regard. When I admit, say, that he's right and that regular men and women could not pull all of it off, and it would be impossible, as I've said many times, if he ever asked me, I would tell him flat out that no, regular men and women can't pull off all the conspiracy that we talk about. There's something else going on here, a supernatural element. Well, that further strengthens his position. The explanations as to how it's happening or potentially why from me and the old guard are so out there, so strange and bizarre, that he doesn't need to hear anymore. He feels he's won because my explanations have crossed the line now into the insane. That's okay. It's the cornerstone of this reality that those who are not ready to see certain things will never be able to see them. It's okay. So be it. The screen world that exists at the periphery of reality and the outer ring is not the same as what surrounds your personal heart-based reality bubble. It couldn't possibly be the same. For crying out loud, George Bush is now teaching a master class, as we've looked at recently, on leadership. What the heck? And he's surrounded by all these liberals that are also teaching their classes inside master class. They accepted him in as one of their own or something. It's totally bizarre. Everything's breaking down. But not only do most in the truth community think the amount of conspiracy in this world is possible to be pulled off, they believe that thousands of events can be pulled off by quasi-government organizations working with secret societies. We're not talking about 20 or 30 big things over 40 years. We're talking about, if you include the small events, thousands of manipulated presentations in some way pulled off to produce the intended level of propaganda in camps without ever being caught. Come on, man. This is ridiculous at this point. The sheer magnitude and number of its presentations can't be explained between our reality bookends any longer. The number of cake and a lake events moves us very quickly, from my perspective, I can only speak for myself, moves me very quickly now into reality breakdown territory, exposing the world as not very real. Some first-grade truthers and spitballers call that a cop-out. Oh, you continue to try to figure it out, spitballers. Tell me how you're doing in the next 20 years. The idea is to walk away from it. That's the only win. If it's actually real, all these presentations on the news to people like Aunt Ginny, if it's actually real to my friend Tony, and potentially fake to me at the same time, well, that's not a real world either, if it can do that, is it? Here's where the camps start to form. A first-grade truther would be eager to explain to me how all of these cake-and-a-lake events could be pulled off, using the tired old tag of lines like paid and threatened secret societies, Tavistock, etc. On the other side, somebody like your Aunt Ginny or my friend Tony would explain to me that because of the sheer number of these events that we claim are in some way manipulated, then logic would dictate that it would be impossible to pull all of that off, and they would not have the means to do all that. And per Occam's razor, they all must be real then, Matt. Don't you see that? And from his perspective, say the frequency or the radio station of the ship, he would be right. So Matt, you're saying all of this over here is a presentation, or this isn't quite real, and this is fake, and this is staged, but then, okay, tell me how they pull it off, Matt. Well, they couldn't possibly pull all of it off. Well, you're just proving my point, Matt. You see what reality does to us? The games, it's the end of war games, guys. It's all that matters. It's the only win is not to play any longer. Tony would say, Matt, I'm going to invoke Occam's razor. What's more likely, Matt, you crazy son of a beach, that thousands of staged events are being coordinated in the shadows in supernatural fashion with no unintentional mistakes being made, meaning about 1 million people or more have to all be in on it in perfect coordination? Or, Matt, is this more likely? That the news stories are, in fact, correct? It's real. Look at CNN, man. It's showing what's happening in the West Bank and Gaza. It's all real, man. Matt, it's not just these presentations, and this is spin, and this is a fake and a lake, and this is... Matt, For some strange reason, you and your insane ilk believe all these events are in some way fake when, of course, every bit of Occam's razor dictates that they're real. And we say back to you, Matt, well, how could they pull it all off? And you say they couldn't. You should check yourself into an asylum. Of course, in general, his argument is stronger. Let me repeat that. From the perspective of every metric in this reality, his side in argument is stronger from the frequency of the ship. That's what dominates this reality. You're an anomaly. Your frequency or radio station doesn't dominate this reality. It's alien in this place. But in general, from this perspective, we are mad to everybody outside of our own group. Yet for each one of these events or presentations that we look at, we have, say, in certain case over here, declared this is fake news or this is a fake presentation. Each case, we could easily prove to our accusers or to our friends and family that we are correct if they would just say, sit down with us, conjoin reality bubbles, spend 5 minutes to look at our evidence or to look at the old iMac, which they never do. It's almost like a rule of this reality that they won't sit down with you to examine the evidence together. They certainly will go off and do their own homework, but that's away from your reality bubble, as far away as they can, so they can then keep getting the frequency that they're getting. They'll never look at ours. You see, I can't imagine it takes too much effort with two people sitting in front of the old iMac to show Tony or anybody else that hollowed out tinfoil can't slice through 10,000-pound solid steel beams. But we'll never know because nobody will sit down in front of the old iMac. It's not hard to sit down in front of the old iMac with someone and show hundreds of examples of laughing and smiling family members the day after the event. At what point, maybe they need to see thousands of them. We could probably produce thousands of them. It doesn't matter. It'll never happen. It's a reality giveaway in some way. Who knows what the explanation is? There's a lot of good explanations. Someone would say, well, higher self or whoever they are spiritually outside of this place says this person's not ready to see what you see, Matt, not ready to be on your frequency. There's manipulations of elements of themselves that they're not even consciously aware of that won't allow it. Sure, there are good explanations. It doesn't really matter. We see this as like a rule here. You tell me one person in the comments that said, I had this best friend that called me crazy and believed every bit of CNN, and then I was able to sit down with them for an hour, and they completely changed, and now they're one of us. Look, maybe there's an exception somewhere, but you know what I would say? If somebody did come around, they were meant to, or almost destined to be on our frequency someday. The Not Nilk loves truth researchers who think the world is completely real. These researchers will surely figure it out if they can just put enough effort in. The answer must be something that can be understood after enough time is put into the investigation. Nope, it's not how it works. We see that clearly now. I can name about 100 things that quickly push into the territory of reality breakdown. Things that never will be figured out or understood by what they call the human being while we're alive in the body. What's more, if you have a prior belief before beginning your research and you carry bias, reality will feed you evidence that supports your established position and bias. It will show you what you want to find, just as you go looking for it. Here's proof. Tell me a conspiracy researcher who is very interested in, say, topic X, Y, Z, who went out on the internet or went to a library in 1970, whenever, to learn about the topic, and they found nothing at all to keep them going. No breadcrumbs at all. Tell me when that's happened. I don't think it's ever happened. Matt, you're back early. Yeah, I went to research all the other possibilities of what Area 51 really is, and I found nothing at all. So I decided to come home and watch the NFL. Never happened. Never will. All the controversial topics it floats in front of us are like a Schrodinger's cat. Is it Schrodinger's or Schrodinger's? Tomato. Who cares? I'm saying, what am I going to call him? Schrodinger. I don't give a shit how to pronounce it. Could you believe if somebody would comment on this? A Schrodinger's cat, from a quantum perspective, they say is in superposition, and in this example is both alive and dead at the same time, until an observer lifts up the box to see if it's alive or dead. The theory is the conscious observer is a key factor in what reality they find beneath the box, and the box on its own does not dictate the reality without the real consciousness being presented, or in this case, the box or what's under it does not dictate the reality. The consciousness, at the very minimum, is a factor, according to this theory. Matt, you buy this? Give me a minute. No, give me a minute. Some things I do, some things I don't. Just explaining the theory as it's presented. Is that so bad? Matt, you're losing it. You better get it together, especially if Tony's listening. You're right. I'm sorry. As a side note, in my opinion, it's stupid for Schrodinger to have used a cat. I can assure you a cat is its own entity of spirit and is not dependent upon a consciousness, human observer outside the box on depending whether it's alive or dead. It exists under the box either way, on its own terms. Matt, let's not turn this into a damn cat video. I ain't going to let this go. Schrodinger, thou art a villain for using a dead cat. Put a rat or anything else under there. That bothers me. Sorry. Maybe that's why the Not Milk chose to use the cat, though, in this stuffed Lenin story. It's a deception right from the start, knowing the cat, of all things, is not dependent on the human outside, which could be an NPC. Could you imagine a cat being dependent on a human, somebody that watches the NFL, to determine if it's alive or dead under the box? Okay, Matt, get back to the point here. Tony will call your father, have you put away. It's a strange theory of mine, I admit, but it's possible that reality could be crafting two answers at the same time to two different people who carry bias and expectation about a topic or outcome, especially two people that are, say, on different frequencies. Perhaps, like they say about the cat, each conspiracy or presentation by the Not Milk could be in superposition in a sense. So if you jump in and try to prove what happened to that football player or soccer player who just fell over, we were talking about that. If you try to prove what happened, you expect to find something. Guess what the Not Milk's going to do? It's going to tell you exactly or show you exactly what you want to find as you research it. Oh, I knew it was related to Spike, you know what? But what if your neighbor goes to research the same exact event and does not expect to find what you expect, but expects everything Dr. F is saying is completely true and legitimate? What do you think reality will show the neighbor? I'm saying this happens too much for it to be a coincidence. Yes, in a way I'm saying it's possible for two realities to exist, potentially, for the same set of circumstances, the same news event, a conspiratorial event in what they would call superposition. Well, maybe. Okay, I'm not putting all my chips on this, of course. You come here for big thinking, right? Or did you come here for me to play it safe? Again, him using that cat bothers me, Schrodinger. Thou art a villain. So right now, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do what the Not Milk does not want. We're going to forever change the Schrodinger or Schrodinger, whatever your damn name is. We're going to change the cat example to something else forever. We're going to lock it into reality. Why? Because we say so. The cat's going to exist either way. So from this day on, it's forever known as Schrodinger's chocolate bar. Schrodinger's chocolate bar, whether it's solid or melted, is not is not known until the box is lifted up before the conscious observer. Well, Matt, it would depend on if the conscious observer is hungry. Maybe. You got to keep that on the table. Those who want to yell at me about temperature of the chocolate bar, well, the conscious observer knows how hot it is outside before the box is lifted. And what if it expects melted? Does it then create melted? Think about it. Schrodinger's chocolate bar. Sorry, cats, for all you've had to endure since this son of a beach came up with that example that tried to harm you. You see, in the past, it seemed like the population was more unified in terms of a reality that presented itself kind of in the same way to everybody. Anybody that's under age 40, I can tell you how normal the 70s and 80s were compared to this complete bizarro Pennywise show that we have today. In the 70s and 80s, I don't know how to say it. We all kind of saw the same chocolate bar once the box was lifted, if you see what I mean. Of course, the Not Milk is an asshole sorcerer of sorts. Sorcerer, say that. He's a sorcerer of sorts. Say that 5 times. Okay, it meddles. Who knows what reality buttons and levers it's constantly playing around with, whether it be at CERN or everything else. It's a meddler in reality. We know that. Perhaps it's made it so there is no longer any consensus at all on the chocolate bar, where in the past, consensus was easier to come by amongst different types of people and groups. Remember our ship example and those on lifeboats. Whether those on lifeboats are moving away from the ship or we're on the shore, the ship is going farther and farther away. Therefore, unlike what potentially existed in the 70s and 80s, our consensus on reality will actually get worse as the decades go by between those on the ship and on the lifeboats. Literally, in our example, the two objects are getting farther away. Consensus on reality is getting farther away. So this is about the only way we can put it. We'll never truly understand the exact mechanism or techniques or why our family and friends believe the absurdities presented on the world news, where there's a gigantic difference between those on the main ship and those trying to get away quick on the lifeboats. Here's one of 40,000 examples that we could pull forth just from memory. A few months ago, a guy jumped off a building in, I guess, the West Bank or something. It was a guy paragliding in towards Tel Aviv in a parachute driven by a fan. Now, Greg and his brother in a Humvee could defend Tel Aviv against that. I'm in no way joking. Greg and his brother in a Humvee, if he knew where the guys in the parachutes driven by the fans were coming in, it takes them a while to land. Think about it. Greg and his brother, Tel Aviv and Israel, they don't need $1 trillion defense infrastructure. Just pay Greg and his brother like $50. I'm not joking. Regarding the absurdities our friends and family believe in, all we can say is it's likely some sort of download or frequency they choose to tune into. At least that's what we have been saying, but now we can put it in a little bit different sense. In the past, for lack of understanding, we made it out to be like a technology or a spell or something broadcast out, a download, a frequency, a radio station, beep, 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 beep. And then, we don't get that broadcast. We have armor. But I think it's more associated with reality itself. Maybe the not milk via buttons and levers and whatever sick things, however they try to manipulate it, the frequency of reality itself, those on the ship are in line with it. It's Schumann resonance, whatever you want to call it, whatever example. I know the Schumann resonance is something different. I'm just trying to relate something that may be a way for us to further understand it. We are not on that frequency. We are not on the frequency of reality itself. See, this is moving it a little bit further along than just saying it's a technology or it's a download or something, the not milk with a big tower and a radio station. Reality itself is a frequency, per whatever Tesla put forth. He's a stuffed Lenin. We are off the frequency of the reality itself. That's why everything breaks down from our perspective and nothing does to your Aunt Ginny or someone like my friend Tony. Really think about that, where everything breaks down to us. Every major presentation of science and history, we find fault and problem with every single thing at this point, where Aunt Ginny, Tony, every single major presentation is completely legitimate, with a few exceptions because of the communist influence now taking over Hollywood, and always a way to explain it away, though, inside the reality bookends. Bookends? What the heck? Always seeing it different. Everything breaks down. Remember the Post-it notes all over the place? Let's look at this event or that event. Oh, this doesn't hold water. Does the defense's case hold water, Miss Vito? No, the defense's case does not hold water. Why, Miss Vito? But there's no real world, guys, where this could happen. Okay, there's enough of us. We're not all crazy. Guess what? They're not crazy. Two different frequencies. There's no other way to explain it at this point. No, what do you think I'm going to say? No real world could do this. The faker the world gets, the more real you are. This reality has become a joke. That's the greatest news of all time from our perspective. Once you see that the reality is completely broken down, you say, hey, dude, that would be out of sight if the reality would break down in front of our eyes. It's the greatest news of all time. Like we've talked about, there are potentially a lot of different types of entities here, a lot of different types of people, spiritual beings, non-spiritual beings, etc. So again, we talked about this, and I'm thinking that this is correct more and more. The atheist, if they take a strong position that Carl Sagan's model of the universe is correct and there is nothing after this existence, the atheist is correct for himself. The atheist is correct for herself. Don't put that burger and chips on my plate. It ain't had nothing to do with me. That's awfully convenient, Matt. Delusions of grandeur. No. It literally could be Carl Sagan's universe to the atheist. Literally. Because that is the entity that they potentially are. Okay, I think this whole place is a lot more subjective than we have any idea about. Seems all, Matt, in my world, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl, and in everybody's world, everything this is the same to everybody. I don't think so. And as time goes by, certainly all the evidence is lining up on the other side. What if the other Tony is right about how he described the different incarnations of higher self? People like you, Matt, and those listening, Tony would say, the other Tony, simultaneous incarnations of higher self. This is a tiny little train stop, and we're much bigger than this place. And the Minion class, the sequentials, the Melvin P's, the role players here, and then the NPCs, those that have a soul, say animated, that has something to do with the nature or something local. Okay, let's just say that is correct. Doesn't it seem like a major not-milk tactic is to get that certain classification, or in Tony's case, if he's right, just go with it, the simultaneous incarnations of higher self, a not-milk tactic to get them to, one, forget about who they are, or to associate themselves with the NPC types, or those that are only animated from a soul perspective, related or coming in some way or sourced from this place. Doesn't it seem like that's a major not-milk tactic? This is hard to talk about, so let me back up and start over. We've seen these little animal videos. Maybe this isn't a great example, but I don't know. There's a little chick that's mixed in with a cat litter, and the chick thinks it's a cat, or, the duck thinks it's a dog because it's with puppies. You've seen these bad examples, but you know what I'm talking about. Maybe that's doesn't it seem like that's what it's trying to do to us? Or maybe, I don't know, whatever incarnated here thousands of years ago, we know exactly we had a better sense as to who we are. A certain subset of YouTube is always like, this can't be a school because we come in here with a mind wipe, and in what school would you come in not knowing anything? Okay, we'll address all that some other time. But maybe that's a result of relatively successful not-milk tactics. So whatever the other Tony called the sequential incarnation, he would call them sequential incarnations of higher self. He calls us simultaneous. Maybe somebody sat down with the Melvin P types. I think there were the role players here. And they said, you're going to play this role in this reality system when we do the ribbon cutting. The ribbon cutting, opening up like a hair salon. Why not? We do the ribbon cutting. What do you think? It came from the Big Bang? Is the Earth cooled? Hot gases or something? No, it's more likely they did a ribbon cutting, like an opening of a hair salon, or what Tony Montana did for his sister, Gina, in Scarface. It's like that. We want you to play a certain role. See, there's going to be different types of entities, three main types. NPCs, their soul is going to be animated locally once we do the ribbon cutting. We got you guys, the asshole role players, and then we got these spiritual beings in here, the real ones here playing the game at the highest level, where they're not going to realize they're much bigger than this place and all that. Your job, you sons of bitches, is to get these people over here to think they're the same as those people over there. In that group, you could have atheists, people that are like NPCs, people whose souls animated locally, people that don't have the same way out potentially, or more confined to that reality. You get these people who transcend this place to think they're those people. That's your role. See, this chicken was born about the same time as those kittens. That chicken thinks it's a kitten. That's what you got to do. And isn't that kind of what it does? No mention ever of spiritual self, James Joyce, that villain in The Dead and Dubliners' Tales, or whatever it's called. The snow is falling on Michael Fury's grave. Snow is general across the all of Ireland. Well, where's the spiritual self mentioned, Joyce? Thou art a villain. It never does that. I think that's nuts. It's kind of hitting me. It's like, this is one of the main roles of these role players here, this minion, this asshole creep class, is you get these people over here to think they're those people. And you know what? If you do that, the no consequences people aren't going to like this. Maybe they manifest it on themselves. The no consequences people think they can just frolic around here naked and nothing will matter in the end of the day. I'm not so sure the minions of the Not-Nook don't play the game like there ain't no consequences, does it? In their defense, let me clarify something. I can hear Scott and others yelling at me. They'd say, first off and foremost, Matt, they want to put there's soul tokens. I used to talk about that, and I stopped doing that because of the no consequences people. You can't give yourself away here spiritually, according to them. because of bad choices. I am coming around to that perspective much more, but that doesn't mean it's they need another term. There are still consequences, even if your higher self needs to keep putting itself in these sorts of earthly reality systems, or needs to incarnate itself because it needs to do more. That's still a consequence. Not getting, we, because of what we see through reality, I think we have a chance of getting our entire self out of here once and for all. So if you just slough off and not take advantage of the situation that we're given, then that, by definition, that's a consequence. But the first thing that no consequences people point out, I've come around to. Believe Matt, stop talking about soul tokens. A real spiritual being, if they fall for everything the Not Nilk ever put forth, and they did everything the Not Nilk wants, they're not giving away vital parts of their spiritual essence, where they go in, as you used to say, Matt, into the Pope's abyss. I'm completely come around to their side on that. However, again, if you don't do what you're supposed to do in a certain situation, by definition, there's a consequence. Okay, to wrap up this section, I understand that this superposition notion about events being almost literally two different things to do to two different types of entities, it's kind of crazy, or it's crazy, okay? But I'm sticking with it for now. I'll look to your comments. There's almost no other way to explain the massive differences in how we see the world versus, say, how our friends see it. Remember, 1,000 sticky notes posted all over the walls here. Every single one will have problems with the official story, major problems. Where your Aunt Ginny, what's the problem? It's completely legitimate. Even weird things, reality shifts like Gettysburg, now 3,000 dead, and Pickett's charge by itself proves they would have lost more during Pickett's charge than the total loss for it. Doesn't make any sense. All reality is kind of broken down. It's just all the frequency. It's all normal to everybody around us that is on the frequency. They're right, because the predominant frequency of reality is what dictates and dominates the reality. We're wrong. So if I'm talking about conspiracy and superposition, I can put it no other way right now, and I have to keep that on the table. Maybe we'll go back sometime to the old theory of the download. They're on the download. They're on the radio station. They're on the frequency. They're tuned in. And, we'll never know the exact mechanism, but whatever they're tuned into, we just think in the old days, we'd say, well, it seems real to them because they're fooled, or maybe it is real to them. I mean, okay, we're not going to figure it out right here. The Tesla quote, though, is likely a stuffed Lenin of some kind, or truth drop. He said, of course, to understand the world, think in terms of frequency, vibration, and resonance, in terms of what your neighbor's picking up versus what you're picking up. We thought that meant free energy. Well, it probably means a lot of different things, but we can apply it, frequency and vibration and resonance, to actually souls and spirits and people that you meet when you're walking down the street, and the people that you meet each day in the damn neighborhood with Lefty. Frequency is very similar to radio station or download, isn't it? That's the term that the stuffed Lenin truth drop that Tesla put out. Frequency, vibration, and resonance. And I say download and radio station. The Mandela effect could be a reality giveaway to the phenomenon of real and fake at the same time, potentially. As I've told you about in the past, Greg is one of those who's had a very unique Mandela effect experience, where reality essentially changed right before his eyes. I've told the story, I'll tell it quickly. As Greg watched his personal recording of The Wizard of Oz in 2016, Dorothy and her friends did not have the gun, the bug sprayer, the net, and all that stuff entering the witch's castle. The thing that was interesting about it, why it kind of makes sense, why he had this little glimpse or 1 second experience, it wasn't labeled The Wizard of Oz. It wasn't in the Wizard of Oz box. It was associated with Pink Floyd in his, what is it called, The Dark Side of the Rainbow, where they put the dark side of the moon. Pink Floyd set it to Wizard of Oz. So it was not labeled in any way. The music over the Wizard of Oz was different. And Greg and I have pondered the barium sweep of the reality reset, passed it by, the way the angel of death passed by Moses' house when he put the lamb's blood over the door. I'm not joking. Like that. The reality reset passed it by until it realized it and reset it. It realized it somehow through Greg's consciousness looking over. There's he had known it changed, of course, to the bug sprayer and the gun. He looks at his dark side of the rainbow. There they are coming in for a split second, 1 second without the stuff. And I don't know what happened. He looked away and looked back, and of course, reality reset. and they had all of those things. Now, if this just happened to Greg, we could say maybe he was smoking something, but there's been thousands of these sorts of testimonies. I've had one myself, but not nearly to that extent. Something that had to do with the Schwarzenegger movie Predator, but I've told you about that. We'll move on. The point of me telling you this story or talking about the Mandela effect at all, and I appreciate the Triggered still being here, is to reiterate that to many people, reality can simply change in an instant. In some cases, some of these things even change back again. Flip-flop, it's called. This is similar to, quote, things or events being in superposition, like we talked about. I don't think the creeps directly cause the Mandela effects. I don't think that at all. However, I leave on the table that because of all their possible meddling and the reality buttons and levers or whatever weird stuff they do through their strange witch's brew, the cement of this reality sometimes doesn't set up like it used to. I don't know if it's just the reality progressing through the ages where things are becoming more fluid, at least to those in the lifeboats off the ship, or it is through their meddling. It doesn't matter. We'll never know. But reality today, agreed upon reality, is just not the same as it was in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. And I can only assume agreed upon reality is going to get worse as the decades roll by, especially if you're in the lifeboats off the ship. Reality today is far more fluid, in my opinion, than it was in the prior century. That could be a result of the times, as I said, the age, or meddling by creeps. Either way, it is what it is. If you're Mandela affected, it shouldn't be hard to have this general conversation about potential conspiracies or presentations by the Not Ilk in superposition with two different people seeing it completely differently, because that's the way all these Mandela effects are. The people, it's more of a reality reset that we accept with the Mandela effect, but to our friends and family, what exists now, of course, has always existed. And other than some residuals, there is proof that it has always existed. Now, the point is, when we see and observe strangeness to that 10th degree like this, then, is saying a presentation or a news event is in superposition depending on who's viewing it from what frequency. Nothing should be strange, in other words, if you are Mandela affected. And it is odd how sometimes people will be Mandela affected, then they'll try to apply regular parameters or bookend understandings or toy box explanations to what's happening over here. Well, how can you have it both ways? You can't be Mandela affected and see reality completely shift and then go over here to these events and say, Matt, no, you're wrong. The secret societies are coordinating. It doesn't make any sense. You can't have it both ways. You might think your girlfriend's a regular girlfriend. Once you look out back and she gets on a Nimbus 2000 and flies up in the air, well, you can't think about her the same way anymore. Once she lands back, you're like, oh, this is a normal girlfriend. You can't have it both ways. Bad example. I'm not going to re-record it. People in our community talk endlessly about the age of Aquarius coming in to replace Pisces. Now, nobody knows the date. If you think you know the date because somebody on YouTube definitively said this or that, you don't know. There's so many different takes on when this age of Aquarius is coming, but here's the most important thing to recognize, in my opinion. Not that we shouldn't be looking for an exact time or date. Here's the key, in my opinion. It does not depend, in my opinion, on a fixed date. It depends, this new age, on the evolution of consciousness, using the original definition of evolution and nothing, of course, attributed or tied to Darwin. Most people in this community, again, when it comes to the age of Aquarius or moving into a new age, they're looking for a marker or a date or a sign or a symbol. It doesn't resonate with my inner knowing at all. We'll move into the new age when the collective consciousness of the real people here, or maybe all of us together, are ready to take on the new age. Doesn't that seem why the Not Ilk worked so hard for Stalled Century? That works so hard to hold us back, works so hard to keep us in the old age with every little thing. We could put the Rolling Stones up again in the Not Ilk meeting room or the smoking room. They could say, oh, we've learned that really doesn't do much, but it might do a little something. Let's just get them back on stage. What do we have to lose? All right. Get the AI to make some stupid ass song up called Angry and put those old geriatrics on stage. Well, two of them can't walk. Wheel them around if you have to. But we don't really get anything out of this. But the AI says we might get a little bit of something. There's no harm to it. Just put them out there. Any opportunity to stall the century out, we need to put our geriatrics out there with their false legs, and hips. And see, they might know it's very marginal. what they get out of it. But there's a reason they're not putting out the stalled century elements to hold back the stars. And Matt, don't you know about the precession, the pronunciation of the equinoxes? No, I never heard that before. They're holding back the progression of the equinoxes of consciousness is what they're doing with stalled century and everything else they need to do. You don't look to a sign, a symbol, a bird sign, or a date. To me, this resonates. Okay, they're trying to hold it back. They're trying to hold on to something. I don't know whether that age is Aquarius or whatever. I'm not into the star signs and all that astrology stuff. It doesn't matter. I see they're trying to hold us back from something. That's all that matters. I still believe, of course, it's a worry about your self-spiritual journey. They or it can't stop you from doing what you need to do. You don't need no new age or a change of the age to do what you need to do. To me, it's something more along the lines of, if this new age comes via the consciousness creates or gets to a certain level, and the new age, whatever that means, comes. I don't think exactly this star is going to be exactly in this place. I don't think it's that's a deception, in my opinion. In my opinion, would be the other way around. If the new age comes because of collective consciousness and the evolution of it, the stars may reflect that, as below, so above, potentially. But you don't need that age to do what you need to do. I'm sure about that from my perspective. It's just that they might be trying to hold the age back, because if that age comes, they might be like, okay, we're done. We have no more control. We won't be able to do this or that. We will have all these people doing what they're supposed to do, potentially in mass. They don't want their role. They know their role. They don't want anybody doing spiritually what they're supposed to do here. And the age of Aquarius, or whatever that's called, or whatever reason it has that label, it might be like enable that, or put that onto the spiritual progression, maybe like put on the Autobahn or put on steroids. And right now, as long as they can keep this age with its stalled century and all its bullshit, then the not milk is in this age. Look at 2020 and its presentations. And the not milk and those assholes in this age, what am I supposed to lie? They're firmly in control over society. That has nothing to do with you and me. They're not fully in control of our worry about ourselves journey. And we don't have to wait for the age. We don't need the collective to do anything for us to succeed individually, in my opinion. I'm going to call that a delusion of grandeur, just making myself feel good. Well, it's in no way said to try to make myself feel better. Every inner knowing says I don't need the masses, the collective. I don't need other, quote, real spiritual beings to do this or to succeed for me to succeed. These people come on YouTube. You've heard these stories like, I broke reality, or I've succeeded, so y'all are winners. I mean, come on. Give me a break. I sat here for a minute thinking about this, and I think we're all going to be on the same page, but it is very important to be very clear with yourself what your belief set is here. Whatever you need to do here, part 2, the work, we'll start off. Do you need a certain age to come for that to happen? I'll give you my answers. I think no. I don't need no age to do what I need to do. Matt, do you need the stars to be in a certain position reflected by the precession of the equinoxes? No. I don't give a shit what the stars are doing. I believe that I can do what I need to do here. Do you believe the collective needs to succeed in general, or can you succeed on your own? My thoughts. Whether even if the collective even is real spiritual beings, I'm not waiting for the collective to do anything. I don't need the collective to do anything. I believe it is 100% up to my little piece as an individual to do what I'm supposed to do here. I'm not waiting on anybody. I don't need anything to happen. I don't need anything outside myself. I'm going to call that delusion of grandeur and make myself feel good. I got other ways to make myself feel good. I had some notes here at the end of the chapter to look for examples, say in movies or art or poetry or books, about superposition. And again, an idea being expressed that where even the writer, the director, the artist, etc., the songwriter doesn't even know what's being expressed. And the two things that popped out to me were two examples of potential superposition. And maybe these aren't the greatest, but it gets us thinking in a certain way or looking for this sort of thing. In the movie Kingdom of Heaven, Orlando Bloom, I've talked about this in the past, at the end, fighting to hold Jerusalem against the Muslims and the Saracens, the Knights Templar, and eventually they've lost to Saladin, I guess his name is, and at the end he looks, what is Jerusalem worth to you? And Salahuddin looks back, nothing. Everything. And he looks back and says nothing. And then for a second you think, Orlando Bloom, we did all this for nothing? And then he turns back, everything. And it's maybe not reality in superposition, but it's saying something there. From perception, what is it? It's worth everything. But what is it? It's worth nothing and everything at the same time. And then there's another part of that movie, Jerusalem, the Saracens, the Muslims versus the Christians. Orlando Bloom says, who has claim here? All have claim. None have claim. It's generally how this reality works. You want to potentially put forth the most mind-boggling principle associated with as above, so below. And by the way, guys, if anybody, I know exactly what that is, or anybody tries to tell you exactly what that means, throw them out with baby in the bathwater. There are 20 valid interpretations of as above, so below, as blah, 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 blah. Oh, I know exactly what that is. Let me explain to you. Oh, it's a war in the heavens. A bunch of bullshit. Sorry. There's so many different interpretations of that, and all have claim. All are valid to a degree. Here's another one I'll throw in the mix. As above, so below. Superposition, quantum state, they reflect right through us, society, reality itself. Superposition, that's what the quantum, they're very small. As below, so above. Things here then, two different conspiracies, can be in superposition. If the quantum elements can be, then the events themselves potentially can be. As below, so below. But what the hell? As below, so beloved. Tony, if you're listening, I have officially lost my mind, and I really do hope you contact my father. Thanks for listening.